En la mañana dando gloria a mi Señor por todas sus maravillas y su grande bendición. Oh, qué grande es mi Cristo, mi divino Salvador. Por eso yo le alabo y le canto a mi Cristo con todo mi corazón. Bendeciré a Jehová en todo tiempo, su alabanza estará de continuo en suprema adoración. Alábale, alábale, hermano, gócese delante de la presencia de Jehová. ¡Aleluya! Le doy gracias, Padre eterno, por su grande redención, porque usted ha prometido derramar más de su unción. Sacrificaré mi vida y le agradaré, Señor, porque un día ya muy pronto, porque un día ya muy pronto la trompeta sonará. Bendeciré a Jehová en todo tiempo, su alabanza estará de continuo en mi boca, porque Él es Rey de toda la tierra y digno de suprema adoración. Al son de este mariachi, qué bonito es cantar, porque ya muy prontito nos iremos a reinar, nos iremos a reinar, nos iremos a reinar.
On the mess I made like only I can do. When I start thinking I'm so far from you, I wake up to hear you whisper that's not true. Well, good morning, mercy, you call me worthy. Feels like the sun shining on my face. Living's good this side of grace. I feel it working. Goodbye to the hurting. You woke me up, put me on my way. Hallelujah, it's a brand new day. Good morning, mercy. Yeah, I'm
Praise the Lord. Good morning, Mercy. 107.3 FM, KZTO. God bless you. God bless you. God bless you. It is Saturday. Already seeing some people popping in. God bless you all this morning. Wow, you guys are the courageous ones up this early. Well, you know what? It's sometimes challenging. You're up, 5 days a week. You have to get up and you're consistent in it. And then you're asked yourself on the sixth day not to get up. Our body doesn't work that way. So Tristan's body does, all right, Tristan? You can actually you could sleep in. You could have slept until noon today, right? Yeah. There's something weird about that, because I remember too being your age too, and being able to sleep, but usually you're staying up late, to be able to do that. I don't know if you go to sleep early, I don't think your body can, not unless your body's just completely, you're tired, but I don't think you can sleep past a certain amount of time. But praise the Lord. Dios bendiga a todos, hermanos. Aquí estamos en vivo el sábado. Y estamos bien gozosos, estamos bien esperando que Dios va a hacer algo este día. Este es el día, también es el día del año. It's the last day of the year. So we're entering a new year, God willing, by tomorrow. So we have a lot to be thankful, a lot to be able to praise God. But I'm also excited because we have a first timer here. Tristan, you know what the rule is, right? Today? Oh, come on, Tristan. What when you're on the radio for the first time, what do you get? Get a cup, man.
Yeah, you do get a cup.
Yeah, you get a cup. A Saturday cup. So God bless. We've got Julio here. How are you doing, Julio?
I'm doing great, thank you, and good morning to everybody listening today. Praise the Lord for that. I'm happy to be here. Amen. Definitely something that I'm not used to doing, so it's definitely out of my comfort zone. But I am here to get out of that and have a conversation with everybody today.
Amen, Julio. And I've loved having conversations with you. I mean, we've had an opportunity during haircuts or whatever it is, or just even a small talk, and so I could tell you have a lot to say. And when I mean not only that, a lot to say from a standpoint of just talkative with experience. You've been through a lot of stuff and you've gone through things, and we were talking about a couple of things yesterday, because you always ask everybody, just so you know, everybody always asks that question.
Right.
I get that. Yeah.
You want to come in prepared.
Yeah.
Right?
Everybody asks me that question, right? Even people that have been on the radio, and when they're coming back again, they'll say, what's going on? What's the interview? And I'm like, when I said I'm ashamed from the standpoint is like, it would be nice to say, let me text you the
Here are the questions you're going to be asked, right?
But it's like right now, it's just letting God's presence kind of lead us and guide us, and that's usually, for me, it's always been the best ones, because I feel like it's not because it's like a surprise moment. It's because God knew what needed to be said for both of us,
for sure,
and how to throttle it if he needs to. But going back to the first time that you and I sat down and got a haircut from you, and I could hear your heart in a lot of the things that you were saying, and what God was doing for your family. That's pretty exciting. But I did like what you had sent me, and I think that's important. I think everybody wants to kind of get to know people, and I don't know if you want to maybe introduce that, kind of talk a little bit about where you come from, where you came from, what you did, all the way leading up to some of the stuff right now. It'd be awesome, and I think that'll help people sometimes understand too.
For sure. I'm as I was talking earlier, I'm first generation American, so coming out here, I do have my parents. I have, we grew up right, but being the only son and having parents whose job was to just make sure that we were getting by, there was a lot of absence where growing up, I was out in the streets, and not necessarily gang related or anything like that. It was just no adult supervision, if you will. Now, during those years, it was a lot going on with, drug usage, just being a kid. And I can't just say just being a kid. I shouldn't have been in those situations, but I was, growing up in the city.
And what city was that?
Grew up in DFW,
so
Dallas area.
You always grew up in DFW.
Yes,
okay.
I was born in Chicago. Don't know Chicago. Was raised in Texas. Lived out there in a suburb of Dallas over in Irving. So this is where, Texas Stadium, where
Oh yeah.
nation's team is
You said it right there.
the nation's team.
You
So
said it.
I grew up there. So it was the outskirts of Dallas. Had a lot of friends that go back and forth from there, and started at a young age, and on a bad route. But before then, I grew up Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
Grew up Catholic as a kid.
Sure.
I was an altar boy, so I can't say I grew up in the church. I was just attending.
Mm-hmm.
Just like a lot of kids
Mm-hmm.
don't understand the word. We just show up because mom and dad are going, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I did grow up in it. Never was all the way committed to it, if you will. Now, as I grew, I tried to get closer, but there was always something pulling me away, and that something was obviously that bad spirit in my ear, always talking about, hey, well, that's not the cool thing to do. You want to be the cool kid. You want to do certain things, and
So the what is it? The sign, the good angel, the bad
good
angel.
bad angel,
Yeah.
and so I've always listened to the bad angel, up until recently.
Mm-hmm.
I've always had the bad angel, whispering in my ears, don't do this, do that. I dealt with coming up. Then right before once I got out of high school, I wanted to join the military. I didn't join right after, like most people do that do join at a younger age. I didn't join. My mom wasn't allowing me to do so.
Mm-hmm.
I was 17 when I graduated, so you still need parental consent to get signatures, join the military, and do that. So she said, I'm not doing that. Try going to college, which is understandable because a lot of kids in the neighborhood that I grew up in, we all joined the military.
Oh, really?
We all did.
Okay.
For whatever reason, we just did.
Like your crew, like the people
Yeah,
you
the
hung
people
out with?
I hung out with, my neighbor,
Was it
my
something
next-
you guys all talked about growing up? Or no?
It's just something we
Just happened,
did. And it's like the two neighbors that were older than us, they were 2 years older. So I was a sophomore, and they were already off in the military. And the reason my mom said no was because one didn't make it back during one of the deployments. So she got to
So
see.
she already had,
She got to see,
a
and it was in the
hurting
middle,
mom and all,
right?
yeah.
She, our next door neighbor was, put down or whatnot. So
yeah.
she got to see Army pulling up to the house and going to the ceremony or the funeral. I'm sorry, and she's like, "You're not doing that.
Yeah.
You're gonna try to go to school and go that route." And so I did try it. I did one semester. I dropped out. I was still doing. I was wilding out, if you will. I got arrested that year like 3 times,
Wow,
and so
okay.
and it was for minor stuff. It
Sure.
was never felony type stuff, which blessed that I didn't, right? Because
Right.
a lot of people that do get caught, the difference between them and me is that they got caught and I didn't, right?
Right.
So that
But
it's
you
not
also,
to
if it would have been, you probably wouldn't have been able to
I wouldn't
get
have been
into the
able.
military, right?
No.
Yeah.
So once the third time came and it was a little bit longer stay than than the other 2 times, is when like my mom came and I couldn't even talk to her face to face. It had to be like plexiglass with the phone. Classic things
Yeah.
you see on TV,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So I'm like, this isn't for me. I can't do this. It's 3 petty things that I did and now I'm here. Well, 1, 2,
next,
3.
Yep.
Next thing you know, you're committing further and further out, and
Right.
so I'm like, I gotta get out of here.
Do you think that without knowing it, or maybe you did know it, but do you think that you knew you just had to get out, like do the military because of that reason? Like you needed that, like something inside of you, or maybe even your friends knew that that's the only way to maybe get away from that lifestyle that you ended up going to, which was getting locked up, or worse, what it would have been is like, I need to, have structure. I need to have discipline. I need to get away from here. And maybe the military was going to be the only thing that, like, you knew that already or something?
I knew that a lot of the friends, or let's just say acquaintances, right? They're not friends.
Yeah.
I mean, it's perceived as friends when we're growing up,
Yeah.
but a lot of them ended up in very heavy drug usage where, ruined their families. One of my neighbors growing up, I mean, he's locked up, won't be getting out until he's 50, 60 years old. So things of that nature. I have friends that they used to call them the rooftop bandits in DFW.
Mm-hmm.
They would actually go through the tops of warehouses and rob the place.
Sure.
And so having those acquaintances so close by, and again, this is a suburb of Dallas. This isn't like a hood area.
Yeah.
This is kids that had, you know, their families and just things that you consume, right? Like the hip hop and things of
Music,
that
all that
nature,
stuff, yeah,
right?
yeah.
You consume that and then you perceive that as being truth. And so then you start living that lifestyle. And so as they were doing that, I wasn't doing it all the way. I knew better. I like I said, I did have a mom and dad, and you know, they did discipline me to understand right from wrong. Still doing bad things, right? But as I was growing, I was like, yeah, I need to get out of here because I'm gonna end up in those footsteps, or I don't know what I'm gonna end up doing, you know. And so I ended up leaving. Gave my mom a month's notice.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she
But
didn't
what
know.
was your mom? Your mom had to have. I know it hurt, but still, your mom had to have been in a different mindset after talking to you through a plexiglass.
Maybe, you know, that's something I never talked to her about.
Because you look at you now. I mean, it could go either way, right? Because you just don't know at that time,
Right.
for sure. She's probably thinking the worst because of the experience of the neighbor losing it. But you know, man, that's also a bottom too. Seeing your son locked up and talking to him through a plexiglass.
Right.
So you're thinking like, I'm over here like thinking like, could this change him?
Which I'm glad that I experienced that, because you're saying, yeah, maybe she did have that. My parents actually left me there. They didn't bail me out, which I'm grateful for.
Yeah.
Because it's a lesson taught.
Sure.
That being the third time, like the first time, I was bailed out. Second time, they're like, all right, sit it out for a few days, then we'll bail you out. Third time is like, listen, dude, we're not going to keep doing this. We're enabling bad behavior if we keep doing this. So the last time I wasn't bailed out.
Tough love.
Tough, you know, and I'm grateful for that.
Yeah.
That made me realize I can't do this. I can't be.
Yeah.
in
What were
this
your
situation.
experiences? Because I mean, it sounds like you know, it helped. Because this third one, like you're saying, you're what was your experiences in there? Did you experience something in there? Did you see like people, like you mentioned, you know, now you're seeing some friends that have sentences that are long, they're 50 years. But did you see stuff in there that was showing like, man, if I don't do something in my life, if I don't make a critical change, you know, this is my environment here that third time, right? Locked up. I mean, did you see stuff like that kind of scared, you?
It wasn't really a scary part. It was more of like you're locked in four walls, and you're like, what is the point of living if you're doing this? You know, you start, and again, I'm only 18, 19 years old at the time, so this is when I'm starting to get an epiphany, if you will.
Yeah.
And for the first two times, I'm like, yo, this is a vacation. You know, I don't have to go to work.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sitting out these tickets or whatever I'm arrested for, and I'm good to go. You know, I'm getting fed, and that's one of the reasons people do go back to jail, is because you live a comfortable life, if you will, to some. For me, it just, I looked at it and I'm like, you're scheduled, your breakfast time, lights come on, lunchtime is at this time, dinner time is at this time, we're shutting everything down at this time, and you're not going outside. So that last time, I'm like, yeah, it was just more of.
How long was that last time?
It was about a month, so
Wow,
it wasn't too
no,
long.
That's a hey.
I just say it because, you know, I know guys that are doing
I know, but
years
yeah.
and stuff like that. So for me, a month in county, it was what it took, really.
Sure. That is a good amount of time, though.
Yeah.
That's enough time to change people. I think a month, because you start to, like you're saying, you know, before, it's like, let's say it's a couple of days, right? I could do a couple of days, right? Let's say it's a week. I could do a week. You start getting into where if you don't know it's gonna be a month, and you're like thinking, it changes your mindset, because now, like you said, you could probably break bad habits in a month.
Right.
You really could, because you think about addictions, you think about things that you're commonly used to. Within a month's time, I think your mind probably starts to. There's probably even clinical studies on it that your mind starts to change, because you've starved it something. So, you know, I know some people too, and I'm sure you've heard people. They'll go in, they'll get locked up so they can get clean.
For sure.
They'll try to do that so they can get clean, because they know that, you know,
That's the only way they'll do it.
That's the only way they can do it. If they don't have, if they're in solitude or whatever it is, you know, that's the only way that's going to happen.
For sure. So, you know, once I got out of there, 2 months later, I was in a recruiter's office. I said, hey, get me out of here as soon as you can. This was end of July, beginning of August. And then I come home, tell my mom, hey, I'm leaving in about 4 weeks. And again, she wasn't happy because maybe she was happy that I wouldn't be in jail, but maybe she was also thinking this is in the middle of both Iraq and Afghanistan wars,
okay.
so it's still in the heat of it.
Yeah.
So her knowing that I was gonna be leaving, her expectation was that I'm going straight over there, which was the fact.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting to go as fast as I did. They ran you through, and next thing you know, you're overseas. And I actually had 2 birthdays out there.
Wow.
So my 21st and 23rd birthday were overseas in those countries. So, that's definitely something that I'm also grateful, because a lot of 21-year-olds, what do is I'm able to drink.
Yeah.
I'm able to do this, and they go and do it big, right? That's what we say when we're younger. We're going to go do it big when I'm 21. And that's when your whole life can change in an instant, where I didn't have that ability. I was stuck somewhere else. And maybe God was placing me there for a reason, so I didn't,
There's a lot of things that
right.
you can kind of see that God was doing for sure, as you've reflected back, because it sounds like you've already kind of played it back, saying, definitely for one thing, for me, just even knowing you before, it sounds like the military saved you.
A lot of it did.
So
yes.
based off of how you just described it right now, it really looks like it created a different person. The character you have, maybe a lot of things that you may have never have had, loyalty, and love that you have for, because I know, a lot of us here, most of us here, are big fans of, our country, and are patriotic and love the military. I know we've instilled that in our kids to be respectful. And I don't know if I've ever told you this story, but I was in Holland, and a gentleman was driving me around, and I think I might have told you this story, but just act like it's the first time you heard it. Just like, but he was driving me around, and he was showing me old churches, and he was like, "This is the church I used to go to as a kid, and this church is like older than our country." He's like, it was, this was in the 1200s or 900 AD and stuff like that. And so he's showing me all this stuff. Then he takes me to this field, and it's like a really nice area, right? There's homes around it. He goes, "You know what this field is? This is the field where the Germans came into our country, started coming into our country." And he goes, my grandpa took me here one time, and he goes, "If anybody ever talks bad about America, you let them know that young men died on this field protecting us." And I was like, "What? I mean, that's crazy that this guy brought me here to tell me that." He goes, that had an impact. He said it had an impact on him, because it was a famous field where just people were battling there by their home. So there is an appreciation, there's an understanding, the love that somebody has for, their country and all that stuff. So you could see that it was had a major impact in you. And you talked about that you went at the height of already some stuff going on with Iraq and Afghanistan. And what years were those? What was that?
So I went in 2007, and my first deployment was in 2009, and my second one was in 2011. Now, when you say, come back a little bit, military, right? It did definitely change my life for the better, as far as I'm more disciplined. I can control certain things, but it also brings conflict within you, especially spiritually.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I was more lost than I had been before. I'd go to a different country and be like, well, why is it America so blessed, if you will,
mm-hmm.
and you have other countries that are not? Or, you start thinking to yourself, well, where is God here?
Ah, got you.
So you start thinking that way. So you start questioning more.
Sure.
So again, it was a conflicting thing joining the military, because again, it was pushing me further away, because you do see things, you see things, and you're like, there is no God here. God is not here. He's not present here. You see blood, or you see certain, or you see,
Violence,
right. There's this little girl that we used to always see, and you think to yourself, why was she not blessed?
Yeah.
Why is she seeing foreigners,
Yeah.
right, going through her streets, right? So you start questioning those things, and obviously where I'm at now, it's a totally different mindset.
Now
than
you
I was then.
understand some stuff. And what's interesting too, because you're you're green. You can say, right? You're green at that time, even though you have the experience of what you're doing, but you're green in life.
Right.
But like you said, I like how you just said it right now, because that's the full circle, right? Because you're like, now
Right.
I get things. Back then that you're in the middle of it, you just mentioned it was a conflict. It was a tug of war, right?
Right.
Of these questioning things, which is understandable, because, even biblically speaking, there's a battle that David was in with his men, that when they were out doing God's, will and defeating enemies, the enemy came in and killed their entire family, killed a town and took prisoners. And you see the conflict that David has in this conversation that he's having, and he's feeling the men hated him. It went from loving him, thinking he's the champion, like we were talking about, but then they were like resentful. It talks about, and he pulls himself away as he's having conversations with God. Like, why did this happen? How could this have happened? That this is, so there's that conflict that happens with that stuff and that personal conversation. So you're at that time, you're saying that this was, but it had to happen, I think, because that's also, I think, part of life, right? The growth side of it is like, you got to get to that point where you're questioning things.
You're questioning everything.
Yeah, because that's going to eventually get you to the answer that, we're, like you said right now, hopefully it does. We'll pray that it does, right? Not all the time it does for people. Right. Some people, it pushes them all one way, right? Where that's what it is. But now talk a little bit about that. So you're seeing that stuff, and it's hard. And war is hard already, as what it is. And what was your experience in getting into it? Because you went straight from, let's say, freedom in the U.S. to seeing now where people wanted to kill you, and you also saw the conflict of the way people were living, which wasn't like what you were seeing back home. So what's going on through your mind, and that stuff is, I'm sure, heightened fear. I'm sure all this stuff that goes on, in the military. Well,
you say heightened fear, which it's a crazy way of thinking. Yeah. My first deployment was Iraq. This was in 2009. We would do convoys and things of that nature, but 2009 was a little bit more calm in Iraq than it was initially in 2001, 2002. So you'd still see some things, but it wasn't as bad. So I was blessed in that aspect. But being young, full of testosterone, like a lot of guys, you get out of the military, you're like Mr. Macho Man, right? When nothing would happen and you're just driving, as crazy as it sounds, I'd pray to God, like, can you, like, let something happen? Because we just went through all this training and I'm doing nothing. Sure. So a lot of it wasn't fear. It was just a lot of it was you joined for a reason. So a lot of us that felt that way wanted to go out. Sure. Now, there was guys that joined during that time, and I can tell you right now that the ones that feared, you can tell the ones that feared, and you didn't want those guys. There was a guy, and I'll talk real briefly about that, was right before we deployed, we shared in the barracks, you have one room, another room right next to it, and then you have a shared restroom, right? So each Thursday we would clean up. We'd clean up everything, and then come Friday, they come inspect. And when I say they, it's higher ranking people from our unit. They got to make sure everything's clean, and so they want to make sure that you're organized. Yeah. Well, on our last week, right before we left that weekend, we still had to do it. Nothing changes. You got your routine. This is what's done until we leave. Well, one of the barracks room, the guy, he was colorblind. Now, how did he make it in the military colorblind? This was during the time that they were taking anybody and anywhere. Right, we needed people out there. Warm bodies, yeah. So he was, he was colorblind, and his next door neighbor, we were deploying that week, and he didn't want to deploy, and it was obvious because what he did was he hurt himself. He started cutting his arms, if you will, trying to say commit suicide, which wasn't the case because it was more of a way to get out. But anyways, you can tell those guys didn't want to go. Yeah. So a lot of the other guys like myself, it wasn't fearful, not until the point until something does happen. Yeah. when something does happen, you know, you're in a different mindset.
Sure.
You know, so you can go down to police activity, you know, police, what people say brutality. Well, in that split second, you're thinking quickly.
Yeah.
It's not something that's you're critically thinking about.
Yeah.
It's just something that's life or death, right? So during those times that it was hard and you start getting some fear into you, your adrenaline does take over. That's something that you're not taught. Adrenaline takes over and muscle memory comes into play. That's why we train so much.
Yeah.
Because
you never taught, you missed something here that's critical. What military were you in?
I was in the Marines.
There you go.
I was in the Marines. That's right.
Let's talk about
it. It was
that.
about the Marines.
Yeah, we got to be proud about that because it's a little inside joke. Well, I'm saying because I know how proud.
For sure, we're the spear.
Yeah. I know how proud the Marines are.
Tip.
But yeah, I mean that's first of all, that's the Marines, right? The Marines are it's a different type of group there, you know. From
it's a different mentality.
100% it is.
And you know, we talked briefly about it. The way it was created, it's not a department. It's the baby brother of the Navy, if you will. So you know, they'll clown on us quite a bit because of it, because we don't have our own budget or anything like that. But it was created by a bunch of men in a tavern in Philadelphia, and I think that was a great way to do it. It wasn't anything politicized, and you know, nothing that, hey, we need this. No, it was patriots that said, hey, enough is enough, and they got together, and that's how the Marines.
They just had
created.
a big birthday too, didn't they?
November.
Was it?
November
How many years was it? I know they.
I want to say it was 248
it was a
years
big one.
now.
Yeah, it was a big because I saw some people post some things on it, and it's been. I didn't realize it had been around that long, that's amazing.
They've been for a while. So,
what's the famous word from the Marines?
Semper Fi. Semper Fi.
So I never knew what that meant, but I would always see it. I don't know if you've ever seen it, Tristan. There's always like the sticker in the back of the. So I always thought it was a way of saying simplify, but what if you can? Do you know a little bit about that?
It's always faithful.
Always faithful.
So
okay. What is it? Latin?
It's Latin. So it's really Semper Fidelis.
Okay.
You just shorten it down for Marines. Semper Fi.
I never knew it.
it.
So it's always faithful.
Always faithful.
Semper Fi. That's
Semper
nice.
Fi.
Okay.
So when one Marine sees another, you'll say Semper Fi, like always faithful to what you believe. So that's why for Marines, I always say, once a Marine, always a Marine, because you do get instilled things that don't change.
Sure.
You know,
Did
it could happen.
Did that help you getting it? So when you got in, you went straight to the Marines? You went into the Marines?
Yeah. So the only reason I went to the Marines, and I never explored any other branch, so it's not to down talk any other ones. We all have a job, right?
Sure.
The reason I did it was that in high school, being in Dallas, they had a ROTC program in high school that I went to. So it was either ROTC or I go to gym. I'm like, I'm going to go take the easy route. I'm going to go sit in ROTC and just learn a little bit of history, get my A and go about my day, right?
Yeah.
But I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the physical aspects of it. They had the same obstacle course that we ran in boot camp. Wow. So it was a great program.
Yeah.
They made it to where it felt that way. I was in a cadet, if you will, in the ROTC. You still get the uniform. You know, it has an ROTC patch on it. And in high school, you do drill. Same thing you do in the Marines, but it's different there. You know, you do more with the weapons and some clapping, which is not something we do in the Marines. It's more of a high school thing. But I was in that, and so I did enjoy it, understanding, you know, the formations.
What did you feel during that process? Because you're in high school. Because, again, I think going full circle, right, coming back, you know, you said that a lot of that stuff, maybe it was boredom that caused you to go out. Not having a structure, not having certain things. Our parents do the best they can, right? They don't always know everything to do. They do the best they can, right? Because like you said, you know, they're having to go out and try to provide and do stuff, and it's difficult. It's difficult. So it's not like, you know, they have us right by their side the entire time or know certain things. They do the best they can. Our parents do. But you're now in this program in high school. And is it building something up in you saying, like, look, because when I'm outside of this, I'm causing chaos or I'm running around doing like all teenagers do, right, during this stuff. But I feel something here because you said you had to learn history, you had to learn, stuff. So is this like building something up in you that's like thinking like, man, this is a family. I feel like this is something that, because I personally take that from you now. I can see, the love that you have for not only the military, but the police, the nation. You're very, and that's unfortunately it's not as common as it used to be,
Right.
and we need to be like that. And I feel like I feel personally that we can be better in that. But can you talk a little bit about that at that time while you're going to ROTC? Right?
ROTC, yes, it's JROTC.
Yeah.
So it was a little bit of both. It's always been conflicting things with myself. Knowing that when I was a freshman and I did that, I'm like, I think this is what I want to do when I get out. So knowing that I only needed a high school diploma, I didn't care about school.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when I was actually acting up more.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I knew what I wanted to do, I knew that I had to do the bare minimum to pass, get over it, and go about my way to my future in the military.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I started doing more experimentations with things that I wasn't supposed to be experimenting with. Skipping school, I was a headache for my mom. I was a pretty big headache early on from freshman year up until I left. So I did dealt with that, and it actually happened twice. So the first time it happened, I was a freshman. This was about this time, about Christmas, November time frame. And when it first happened, crazy enough, I didn't go to the hospital. I was with a bunch of other kids my age, which think about it, I was blessed to still be alive.
Yeah.
I started throwing everything up because that's something you kind of see on TV, right? So I'm like, hey, let me replicate that. So the people around me were forcing me to do that. And there's like, just go sleep it off and all this. And as I was laying in bed trying to sleep it off, I didn't want to close my eyes, because when I closed my eyes, I felt like my spirit was leaving. As crazy as that sounds, like I was starting to see white. Like it was just white. I couldn't feel my legs, and I started seeing white. And that's one of the first times I started praying, like, God, if you let me get through this, I won't do this again. I'll stop. And so anyway, I got through it, and went about. Took me all day. I was out with it for all day.
Wow.
And I was just drinking water, and I was just out of it. You know, if I would have closed my eyes and maybe not woke up. But that was a lie. It happened a second time because I'm young and dumb, and I said maybe this time I'll do a little bit less. And then it happened. It happened again, and that time I said I might not make it this time. And that time my mom did take me to the hospital, and it wasn't for overdose causes. It actually gave me heart problems at the time.
Wow. Okay.
Like it was giving me palpitations. It just messed me up. So I had to be, had to wear those gadgets on me just to record my heart, because the doctor was like, well, I mean, he seems perfectly fine. We do see palpitations, but take this. So once that happened, I cleaned myself up. Stopped using any drug, any hard stuff. I was still smoking. I started at a very young age. My parents, my mom, my dad would always work, so she had to deal with that. She'd see me drinking in the front yard as young as 14 years old. Like,
I was going to ask you that. That's the other question I was going to ask you. Is how young were you when things started? Like for you, like you just mentioned right now, but just in general. With everything, with the experimenting, how young were you? Do you remember?
13.
13
when I first started.
And do you remember, what made it start? Like hanging out with friends, or just?
No, it was actually, I took a trip to Mexico, so we'd go twice a year, go visit my dad's family, and one of my female cousins, she actually passed away not too long ago, but she was like, hey, you want to come to the roof? I'm like, all right, it's my cousin, She was about 3 years older than me, so she was 16. I'm like, all right. And she's like, hey, you want to try this? And I'm like, all right, it's my cousin, let's hang out. So that's when I started. I was in Mexico, and then I came back, and then I'm like, let me see, maybe I could do a little bit more or whatnot. And that addiction actually lasted for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, smoking.
Mm-hmm.
That addiction, you know, I still fight my temptations
Yeah.
up to this day.
Yeah.
You know, because I started at 13. I'm 34 now. I'm quitting at 34 because again, I'm
Yeah.
very new at this journey.
Sure.
I'm starting at 34. That's more of my life than not.
That's crazy.
You know?
Yeah.
So I've been, and even in the Marines, you know,
Yeah.
it's been long enough. I can say it, right? So,
Yeah. It's common.
yeah, it's common.
Yeah.
So I didn't smoke. I didn't do any drugs while in the military.
Yeah.
It was more. There was a thing during that time where the spice. I don't know if that was something around here.
I remember
K2?
I remember hearing about
K2
it. Yeah.
spice and salvia. Well, those things you couldn't. It wouldn't come out on a drug test, so you could be able to do it, and then it would be like 15 minutes of enjoyment.
Yeah.
Right. And I say enjoyment because that's what you feel you're
Mm-hmm.
feeling, and then you'd be fine. So that addiction never stopped. I just did.
So it's interesting how because you and I have talked a little bit about that. You've mentioned some of the stuff with it, which is, you know, again, a credit to you fighting this, and it is a daily fight.
Yeah, it is.
It is a daily fight just so you know, for a lot of people, and it's powerful for you to mention it. And I know when you told me that, and you shared it with another brother here, kind of telling him that. It's funny, we were talking about some stuff yesterday on the radio too about, you know, God takes us back to, I remember my daily fights when it was, you know, from addictions, and I'm compassionate to that, right? Because I know, you know, there's the stumbling can happen. I know things can happen, but don't lose on to what God has for you. You know, God has something for you and your family, and I think what's the most beautiful thing is seeing a family that is actually going to change the path of their family, because you're going to be you talk about your first generation, you know, American and stuff like this, but you're going to be a first generation believer that's going to establish and is establishing a path for their kids. So your kids are going to know stuff. It's kind of like in our situation, you know, our dad came to the Lord in his 30s, and we were young like your kids are. It's crazy. It's almost like your kids as the story with my dad, and we didn't see a lot of stuff because he changed his life. He quit, you know, went cold turkey, got it, you know, and God had a purpose for his life in the ministry, but all we knew is what God had done in his life moving forward. Mm-hmm. And we're benefactors in the blessings. We're benefactors in our knowledge. We're benefactors because of his commitment and dedication to something serious. In your situation too, like you're talking about addictions. You talk about a drunk. He was a drunk, locked up all the time. You know, a bartender, you know, smoker, doing all this, drug user, all these different things. And, you know, you talk about a divine thing God started talking to him, which I'm excited to hear how that connection happened with you, like we were talking about a little bit before. But I know he was. That's why I told you. I even sent you that message. My dad would have loved your family, you and your family, because he would have saw himself. Because that's who he was. He was, you know, tattoos everywhere and locked up all the time. Didn't have, you know, guidance. You know, knew violence. You know, he was a violent person in the streets. You know, wanted to, because he hated his life, wanted to kill himself because of killing a friend in a rollover. So he was always saying, why did I live?
Right.
And always looking for that. But I think that's a powerful thing, going back to, you started at 13, and, you know, it's almost 21 years of just knowing that. That's a lot. That's a long time. And I think that it's something to be said to everybody that's out there listening, is like, you know, these things happen. Addictions happen. Mm-hmm. And right now, you know, that way we can pray for you and think about it. But if you can, I know you started talking about how early it was and even how long it's lasted. You got out of the military what year?
2012.
So 2012, you get out. When you get out of the military, are you dropping right back into kind of the mindset that you had before you got in, like with the struggles?
Sure. Yes, for sure. I came back and like nothing changed. Like if I didn't leave, you know, for about a year. So, but going back to like the high school, so even though I did have that addiction, that actually was when I was actually having more spiritual battles. That's when I could write a pentagram or draw a pentagram on myself and not think twice about it, or I'd put the numbers on me, and I was just lost. And I was into heavy metal, like death metal type stuff, and my mom, she didn't like it. She grew up Christian. My dad was Catholic. So those two things always kind of clash with each other. And so that's why I was always, I guess, lost with it. Because I'm like, well, one has, the saints and all that, and one doesn't, right? So I was just like always confused. That's why I questioned it so much. And even to this day, I question things because it's seeing different religions already. You're like, well, what's the right thing? I don't want to do the wrong thing, right? So you start questioning. It's just human nature. But I started doing those things, and my mom wasn't for it. She would always tell me, son, that's devil music. That's not something you should be listening to. But being how she is, trying to be a mother, trying to not conflict with the motherly love, and also knowing it's not good, maybe she could have pushed it a little bit more, but she let me express myself at the time. So she was like, all right, it's a phase. Maybe she didn't say I'll pray for you, but maybe that's what she was doing. Anyways, one night, my first encounter, if you will, with something bad or evil presence. I was listening to this band. It was midnight, and my mom took care of kids. And so I had this necklace. Back in the day, I don't know if you remember, they had the little metal balls that you just kind of put it, it's kind of like the rocker thing to do. So I had some necklaces like that I had laid out on the couch. And so I went to my room. I'm like, oh, let me go get him, because maybe, if I don't wake up early enough and the kids come, they start playing, maybe they'll break it, lose it, whatever. So I get up, I go out to the living room, and, I turn on the light, grab the necklaces, and as soon as I turned off the light, I felt a rush of air come at me. It was like a gust of wind come at me, and then there was a growl. There was a growl in my ear.
Oh, wow.
Like it's just like like an evil growl, like an animal. And as a kid, you would see movies where somebody gets scared and they don't move, they freeze, and you're like, yo, that's dumb. Why didn't he run? But I experienced that. I experienced that. That's why I said you see movies as a kid and you're like, I would have ran. And so that wasn't the case. I actually felt my blood pressure drop from my head to my toes, and how I felt that presence. I didn't move. And then within like 2-3 seconds, felt like longer than that, I turned on the light and it went away. And I ran to my room. And so my parents thought I was crazy. They're
you told them about it?
Yeah, I told them, and I did sleep with the Bible next to me. Again, I was just like, this isn't a joke, and you would have thought that experiencing something like that, you'd become more of a believer, where, I still didn't run to God, I still didn't run to him. I was still doing dumb things. So it took me up to that point, and, I experienced those things. Then I graduated, and that's when I went to military, right? So that
is crazy though. And I appreciate you sharing that too, because there's phases where people are lost, right? And they're lost with an exploration intent. So it doesn't sound like you're lost, right? If you're exploring, but you are, because you really don't have to be exploring, because you're now playing with things that you have no understanding about.
Right.
And there's a lot of people that are doing that, and now even more blatantly. Now people are just like, they're as free as can be. Back, there was a time, like in my time, it was unorthodox. It was, people would do it, show those things, walk around so you'd be scared, and try to, have that other lifestyle, satanic or whatever it is, so you'd be scared, and.
Well, you say that, and I think it's always been there subliminally. Like, I remember astrology. That's one big thing where people live by the stars, and they pray that's their God. And back then, I remember my mom watching Univision. That was big, always novelas and stuff. Well, there was this dude. I don't know if you ever remember him. His name was Walter Mercado. Well, he was big back then.
Is it the one that would take the calls for people to
something similar like that,
tell
but in
them the
Spanish
future,
version? You know, so it's always been there. It's just, you know,
Yeah.
it's gotten, like you said, progressively
Yeah.
worse, where they'll do it in your face. And
Yeah,
you know,
now
today-
it doesn't even matter.
It's not even hidden.
Yeah.
I mean, you got the show Lucifer. It's in your face.
Yep.
You know,
You're right. And that's what an experience to have, and you could tell that it was an impact in your life because you know, you could feel the chills still and just remember what it was, and it's craziness, right? Because it starts to show you is like you went through that, and yet doesn't have a complete impact, right?
Right.
It nudges you a little bit, and you're like thinking, because we all gone through stuff like that. I've had that moment happen to me where I had a pesada, you know, where when I was sleeping and it woke me up and it muted me and I couldn't say anything. It was holding my, and then all of a sudden the doors in the house slammed, pa 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 pa, and it dropped me in the bed, you know, and I knew it was real because I could see the clock, my alarm clock, changing time to show me I was awake, and then I could hear my dad praying in another room, and there was just something going on, right? And again, those doors, just all the doors that we had in the house just slammed as it left. And I remember waking up and I'm feeling the same way, and I'm all, you know, what's going on, and it's that battle. But was I still gonna live right? No, I still went through stuff, and I still was. But that experience had an impact, like it, you know, did for you. And I think going now. So you get out of the military at 2012, right?
Yes.
And you're back, kind of going back into some of the stuff that you're going through.
Yeah, right. For the first, I want to say 3 months.
You're not married yet, right?
No, I'm not married.
Yeah.
I actually met my wife that year.
Okay.
About June time frame
Uh-huh.
of that year, 2012. So from January when I first got out up until about April, I mean, I was living bummy. You know, I just got out. You know, I do have money because I did save up my money before I got out. But I didn't know much about money. But anyways, I got out, lived with my parents for a little bit while I got situated. Like, hey, well, where am I going to live? You know, I'm only 23 years old at the time. So I'm moving back. And
didn't pick up any trades during that time. I know some in the military you start to.
No, that's one thing I do regret. I mean, you always look back and you're like, oh, well, I could have done something. But my job specialty, I couldn't do anything besides go be in a demolition, like construction, where you know, I'd be able to set up explosives or stuff like that. Now it's not EOD. I don't know how to take it apart, but I know how to set it up and do things like that. So no, I didn't come out with a trade like I would have wished I did. You know, so my goal was to get out and be a cop. That was my goal.
That's right. You had mentioned that, right?
Yeah, that was my goal, was to get out and be a cop. So when I did get out, the first 3-4 months until about April, I mean, I was just going to work. I worked at a printing company. And before I joined the military, that's what I did. You know, again, I was out for a year out of high school before I joined the military. Went back to printing company, and I'd go to work, and I was smoking breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I'd get out of work and go to a dude's house that was, you know, the guy that was selling the stuff, and it was like just 5 dudes. We just hang out till about 7-8 o'clock, and it was just round after round, like a, you know, we thought we were Snoop Dogg or something, you know. So, you know, I lived like that for a while, and then I met my wife. You know, we were, you know, dating or whatnot, and I still had. I wasn't smoking as much then. I did slow it down, but instead of going to smoking, I was actually drinking more. So when she met me, I was not I don't want to say a drunk, because I wouldn't get to that point, but I did need to have my 3 beers. You know, anytime we went out, I'd have the one that I have open and the one for the road. You know, so I was still dealing with that, and it took a little bit, a while to kind of calm down. My temper was different. A lot of it had to do with the fact that you're so used to structure, you're so used to saying, hey, we got to be there by this time. It means that time, or 15 minutes prior or whatnot. Right. And when that doesn't happen in the real world, I'd lose my mind. Or if, you know, I don't cuss around my mom or my siblings. I got back and my siblings are cussing in the house. And that just, like, that would trigger me. Like, you know, there was up to a point where they wanted to call the cops on me. My mom wanted to put me in a PTSD type program or whatnot. So it was pretty bad for a while with my tempers and stuff like that. And it took me a while. It took me until maybe right about before I had my first kid in 2015. So it took me about 3 years.
And did you see stuff in the military? Did you see battles? Did you see any kind of...
I was fortunate not to see as much as others did. The reason being is because of where I was.
Right.
So both deployments, I was in the desert.
Uh-huh.
So when you're in the desert, you're not really dealing with
the IEDs and all that stuff.
No, you're dealing with IEDs.
Uh-huh.
What you're not dealing with is getting shot at. The reason you're not getting shot at is because when you're in the desert, it's just open field. They have nowhere to hide. So there was not a lot of that. Now you would go through some towns and you'd get shot at, but it wouldn't even phase you. Like you'd be in the back of the truck and you just hear the ding ding ding, and you're just like, we're just driving by because it's small arms, right? So you're not. It doesn't bother you. What does bother you is in those situations is dealing with IEDs.
Yeah.
That we dealt with a lot.
Yeah.
Quite a bit.
Just on roads.
Just on roads. Yeah. So there was I want to say a few times that, where it was close calls. One time there was one that did explode. It was 2 trucks ahead of us. So you wait 30 seconds and, it could have been my truck. It could have been, I never thought about it like that. It wasn't my time. I was blessed. It wasn't for me. But yeah, I was fortunate that I didn't have to deal with the shooting. Like if you start going to the northern side of those countries, there's more trees, more coverage, more hills. So those guys definitely dealt with more of the small arms combat.
Right.
For us, it was more bombs, and we definitely dealt with a lot of bombs.
And I guess the reason I was asking is because you mentioned the PTSD, and regardless of seeing it or not, the pressure, the thoughts, the seeing, and what I mean, you did see enough. I think even hearing ping ping, and I know you're saying like you could tell that it was not heavy arms or anything like that, but it's still not common for you to hear that. You know what I mean? You just
think it's little ding dings. Let's just hope it's not a RPG one day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's what I mean.
They get smart and realize, hey.
So at the end of the day, you probably were wound a little bit coming back, and now things are just irritating you. You're
sure.
heightened, whatever.
So my second deployment, I didn't have to go. I was going to be getting out about the time that the unit that I was in, they were deployed. I would be getting out. So they actually gave me the option. Hey, you don't have to go, but if you do want to go, you can just extend your contract and you go out there. The reason I said yes was, for one, my first deployment, being young and dumb, like I keep saying, was I spent it all. I had nothing to show for it. I bought a truck and did little things like that, but I was partying. I was doing things like that. Second round, I'm like, well, I need to get out with some money, have a backup. And the guys that I did do my first deployment with, they had to go. They had no say. They still had time under their contract. So I chose to go. And that one definitely was a little bit different than the first one. That one was Afghanistan. That was actually the year that Osama was killed. So I was actually, I think I told you that before.
You were telling me that, yeah.
Yeah, and it was in May of 2012 when he was killed. And so out there, they do Ramadan. So during that time, they don't, we used to say they don't like to come out and play. It's their religious time. So they didn't. But as soon as Ramadan was over, it was more, they wanted to come out and play. We said, they wanted to do more. Our base was, you'd have locals coming in. Well, it was to a point where, like, you can't even trust locals because a lot of times they do infiltrate. And so dealing with, hey, now not only do I have to deal with what's outside the wire, now I got to make sure that the guy that's giving us our food isn't, so you're walking around loaded everywhere you go.
Right.
So even though, blessed, nothing happened, when you're walking around with altered mentalities everywhere you go, like, after some time, it definitely does. It gets to you.
Sure.
You know what I mean? You're just, and so for a while there, once I did get out, I had problems sleeping for a long time. I don't know if my wife had said that. I think maybe it was to you. I don't remember who she said it to, but my biggest issues were sleep.
Mhm.
You know, I couldn't sleep. It would be long, and that's kind of how I fell back into my, you know, my usage and
Mhm.
smoking, because that was the only thing that helped.
Mhm.
I did seek, you know, going to a doctor, and you know, I'm not a big pharmaceutical believer. I don't like pharmaceuticals,
Mhm.
and this is about the time that my wife was pregnant with our first child in 2015.
So talk about how you met your wife.
We actually met at work. We worked at a contractor for immigration.
Okay.
So we met at work.
And she was in the military too, right?
No, she wasn't.
Okay, I
No,
thought she was. Okay.
I met her after.
Okay, you
I
met her.
her
Okay.
after.
I didn't know if you guys had met also with a little bit of that as a.
She's a little bit younger than
she's,
me.
But she's for not being in the military. She's very pro her husband waving that flag, which is awesome. And my wife's the same way too. Again, we you know, again, it's important for us to recognize that.
And that's one thing that helped was being elsewhere and
Yeah.
seeing how other people live. Definitely made me come back and appreciate the things that we do have. And I
Mhm.
think that's the problem with, you know, not getting too much into that part, but I think that's the problem with America today is we've been so sheltered here
Mhm.
and protected that, you know, we're creating our own problems just to have a problem where
Yeah.
we really don't, you know. And so that's where the love for America fades.
Yeah.
Now, you know,
But it helps to hear even how you described it over there, because people, you know, like my son's right here, and he hears that, and you know, now he's going through today and gonna go do stuff and say, well, there's places that this can't be done.
right,
There's freedoms that we have because, you know, we live in a great country,
for sure.
and we have to spark that up again, right? It's kind of like a kindled fire, right? We got to get that thing flaming again. People understanding that, because unfortunately, all the way around them, and you know this too, it's just the negativity of stuff.
For sure.
And I think that now, go ahead and finish with how you were saying you're now with your wife, and she's having your first child, right?
So we're having our first child, and that was 1 year that I stopped. I stopped everything, cold turkey did. I was like, well, I don't know the process. What happens if my wife needs to go to the hospital? You know, I'm playing all these scenarios. I'm like, I can't go to the hospital looking like this or feeling like this, you know. So I did stop, but I did, instead of, you know, doing the usage that I was using, I'm like, let me go try some pills. That was the first time I started trying pharmaceutical stuff for, you know, what I was being treated for. But anytime I took that, I just felt like a zombie the next day. There was no life. You know, you're essentially using a legal drug.
Yeah.
You know, instead of me smoking, now I'm using something somebody prescribed, and I'm feeling the same thing, and even more so worse than I was smoking, in my opinion. So I stopped that as well, you know. And so, you know, having my first kid, if I stopped, if I woke up, I couldn't go back to sleep. So my wife took a lot of that duty up in the beginning, and a lot of it, you know, feeding our daughter, you know, breastfeeding and stuff like that. Tried that, so that helped me essentially for a little bit. But after that, now having to help her and wake up.
Are you feeling like some maturity in your life, like now that you're starting to see your family?
For sure.
Because I mean, you're making some decisions, like you're wanting to stop because you're processing things now. Those are things that I think that, like, we're talking about stages in life, because you're like thinking like, man, if something happens, then I gotta be there. I gotta be there. Right. And so, and then I think that it's powerful how God does that, right?
For sure.
God brings you that blessing, your daughter, and now it's like we're forced to make changes in our lives.
But again, I still didn't learn. You know, I still, you know, I did it for about a year.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, well, I went back. I'm like, I guess I'm fine. So I went back, you know, started smoking and, you know, doing all that. And never around my child or anything like that. It was always step outside and stuff like that. But I did that with my other two and didn't think twice about it, because now I knew the process. I knew, you know, what's to be expected during a pregnancy. And so I wasn't as strict with myself as I was, you know, the other times. And I was saying this to somebody was, well, at first I felt like it was medicinal. You know, something like that. You know, it could be used medicinally, but just like anything else, you abuse it. And it's like, okay, first it started with, it's going to help me sleep. It helped me sleep. And then next thing you know, well, now I want to wake up and do it just because, you know. And then it became breakfast, lunch, and dinner, like I said. Then it got to a point where I would do it right before going to a movie. Let's say if I take my kids to a movies, I'm like, well, I really don't want to see this movie, but let me go step outside real
Yeah.
quick before I go. And it felt more like
Thank you. Man, we got some gifts
bringing
here. Look at
gifts.
that.
I got an extra 6 donuts for your kid.
Aw.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks,
you.
Tina.
Thank you. But I lost my
I
train
don't.
of
I don't
thought
ever.
there.
Just real quick. I don't ever. This is a nice little gift for your interview here.
Kiddos, yeah, for sure.
So you were saying that
Yeah.
you used the example of the movie and
So yeah. So I would do it. Now my kids, they're enjoying because I've always been there for my kids, whether I smoke or not. They at the time they couldn't tell it, right? They're kids. They were dad. So as they're building memories with me, they're happy, and I'm there, and I'm happy I'm there, but I'm not in the moment.
you're not there, right?
Yeah, like I'm there and I'm enjoying their presence, but then here comes nighttime and it's like my day just flew by and it felt like I wasn't there,
Yeah,
even though I was.
got you.
do
Yeah,
remember.
that makes,
you know what I mean?
makes sense. That's crazy that you see that now or seen it because you could be that in a lot of stuff. You could be that in drug use. You could be that in work. There's a lot of examples of that, and you've got to seize the moment, in things, and because that moment will pass by fast.
It does, and so that's kind of what got me to slow it down for a while.
Yeah,
Because I wasn't living in the moment. I was just there because my kids wanted me there, and they're happy and they can't tell no different. But at the time, I'm not thinking about that. I was thinking about myself, right? So yeah, it took a while to get to that point to finally completely stop.
Yeah. Now you said something pretty powerful, because you've identified something, and that's helped to completely stop. You put something of importance, which is your kids, your family, and now you're starting to see, like, look, I could fake this, I could keep on doing it, I could be sneaky about it and how I'm doing it, or I can completely quit to be in the moment and to be in their lives. Because I know now that another compliment that I have for you nowadays for you and your wife, I know you guys are highly involved with your kids. I know you guys are doing stuff, going and hiking and just doing stuff, trying to get engaged in different things. Right. And you've kind of spoke some stuff in the future, what you want to do with your son and how you want to teach him things and do stuff. I think that stuff's critical, because see, all your life, all you've known is one thing, right? Being raised. Now you're wanting to learn something new, and I can see an excitement in you learning stuff new, because you've asked questions and you're willing to at least hear about something, or because for us, we talked about this last week when we were here with the brothers, is like, for many years we would just do stuff because we saw our parents doing it. I didn't want to, I had to make a decision in my life that I didn't want to tell people, well, I believe like this because my dad believed like this. I didn't want that. That to me is like sheepish, right? I wanted to have a discussion. I wanted to be passionate about something. I had to make a decision that I was going to respond to somebody saying, nah, this is why Jesus is real. And the more I found that, the more excited I got, the more I wanted to uncover more. That's why when I'm having a conversation with you, it excites me, because I can go to the Bible and examples. Like I mentioned on the military side of it. That day, I've got a book, and it was given to me. It was the worst day of your life, and it's the story of David in that battle.
Okay.
And it's crazy, because it's like, you think you had a bad day. Imagine coming back and all your homes are on fire as you're watching, coming around the corner, and your families are gone and people are dead all over the place, because the enemy came in while you were defending, came in and did that to your town. And so it's a whole story about how to handle things like that. It was powerful. I needed it in my life and stuff like that. And my sister ended up giving it to me. But you can find a lot of those answers, in the Bible. And I know that's what's exciting, is like right now you're at that state where it's like, it takes time. But I promise you one thing, and I know people, and there's a lot of people that were in your situation, man. Now I see them, and they've dug, and when they got excited when they hit things, look at this, oh man, look at that nugget, and I'm looking forward, for you and your family for that, because you can see the benefits that are going to come from it with your kids. You know, it's already a benefit just right now because how young they are. If they don't see or experience stuff that you saw or experienced, right? If they're better off, that's already something to be proud of. And I know that there's some pride in that from you. Is like, you know, I moved now. If you want to, you know, and as we're wrapping up this first one, we'll do some more in the future because you don't ever get a chance to go through everything. Like Anthony was. It was crazy. I was like, man, you got to come back just to talk about some stuff. But if you can, just to let everybody know, talk about how you ended up over here, and talk about also the, you know, your guys' commitment, your guys' kind of commitment. Like, we want to establish ourselves close to a church. We wanted our kids to, I don't know if you want.
For sure. So, the way it happened was, you know, we started our own, you know, we went self-employed in 2018, and we always wanted to grow something out in Fort Worth area. We would visit, my wife and I would visit this general area. We'd go to Lakeway. And that's when Lakeway was a little bit smaller than it is now, right? So there was, you know, bed and breakfast. We'd go just to get away. We'd leave the kids with my parents. And so anyways, we'd go there, and I was going to school to get my instructor license for barbering. And I met the barbershop owner that got me to move down here. I met him up there while he was getting his barber license, and you know, I clicked with him. I've always clicked with older people than me.
Yeah.
A lot of it has to do with I learned from them. So anyways, he would tell me, oh yeah, I live in Austin, and I'm like, oh cool, you know, I go there frequently, you know, just to get away. He's like, well, I don't necessarily live in Austin, I just say Austin because that's what people know. I live in Marble Falls, you know, you should come check it out sometime. So my wife and I would start coming out here to Marble Falls, and we loved it. You know, had things more outdoor hiking type stuff. It was a little bit slower paced than, you know, the city. And back then, probably about 3 years ago, I told him, if you ever need somebody, let me know. And 2018, he started his barbershop, and I started my location up there as well. And so last year, November, so it was 2021, he reached out and said, hey, I got a chair that's opening up if you're looking into moving. But before he reached out, in October 2021, I kept this man. He was kind of a mentor, if you will. I mean, he didn't know he was my mentor, but he, you know, his name, Mr. Booth. I remember, you know, he's a established businessman in the area, and I would ask him questions, you know, like, hey, you know, he's in his 60s, and so a lot of times when you talk to somebody like that, they're more than willing to talk about experience and stuff. So, but how did you do it? Like, how did you have a family and still become, you know, very successful in the businesses you do have and stuff like that? And his first thing that he said was, well, you know, I've never, you know, a lot of it is faith-based. Yeah. That's what he said. Like, I never have prayed for my businesses. He's like, I've always prayed to God to just place me where he needs me. Wow. That's what he told me.
Powerful.
And again, this is the time I wasn't a believer.
Yeah, yeah.
And, you know, I said to everybody, I was like, that doesn't help me. Like, I'm asking for advice right now, how to build this business up right now, you know? This praying is not going to do anything for me, right? It's just my mindset. Yeah. So about a week or two after I had that conversation with him, my lease was coming to an end in the location that we did have in January of 2020, of this year. And so I prayed to God. I said, hey, you know, place me where you need me to be. And at that time, we were already looking at moving. We were going to move to Colorado Springs. Like, I had my Colorado Springs. Yeah, I had my barber license to cut out in Colorado Springs. I went through the hassle of finding a job out there. We traveled out there. We did everything. We were moving, you know. And I prayed to God. I said, and this was the first time. So again, I'm only a year in back in this journey. So it's there's more to go. I prayed and I said, God, you just place me where you need me to be. And within that next week, I got a call from the guy out here in Marble Falls, and that's when he told me I need, you know, a chair's opening up. You got a chair that's opening. And what was surprising to me was, even though, you know, I knew him, he knew me, we follow each other on social media because we had our locations. That's as far as it went. You know, we'd say what's up every once in a while, but we never kept in contact, if you will. So for him to reach out a week after I prayed for somebody that I hadn't talked to like that in a while, I'm like, yo, this is our door. Like, this is our sign.
And you connected that pretty quickly, like it's saying, like, you know, as far as like I prayed for this, I tried something, because again, these are the beginning, right? You know, because this you still haven't had any kind of tutelage or anything on when it comes to faith, and your experiences of what you've seen in faith has maybe been very limited in understanding, right?
For sure. So I just, it felt like I knew.
Yeah.
Like I knew that was our door. And they always say, you know, the man leads the family, right? So essentially my wife was a believer as well, and when we got together, we both had a falling out. Like, we both didn't believe anything. If her mom brought up something like, you know, about God, we discredited it off the bat. Like, we're not talking about that. We're not, you know, this is fake. You know, or my dad would be, oh, thank God it's working out for you at the location. And I'd be like, God didn't wake up in the morning to go and do this or go do that. That was my mentality, right? So when I did pray last year, that happened. I was actually the first one that was kind of falling more into the faith. And so, and I was bringing my wife with me, like, hey, I think this is that. And I think we need to go. I think God is taking us that way. And she, at first, you know, I mean, she didn't discredit me or anything like that. Yeah.
But it had to have been different.
But it was
it
was just like, what are you talking? You know,
where are we going with this? Right?
Yeah, like we've both been discrediting, but
Sure.
we've always had falling. Like, we'd go to church and fall out because a lot of it we can talk about it is that in mega churches, you know, a lot of it is money based. You can tell by the way they talk, and more of a motivational, feel good place. And so we'd always be like, I guess that's what it is, you know, this is the religion and we're not for it. So we fell out. And so anyways, when we got that call, we decided, okay, let's move. And so I told him I can't do it until January. He said, great. I don't need anybody till January. So that was another sign for me. So come January, my last day over there was on a Wednesday. And he didn't need me till that Thursday, the following day. So there was 2 for 2, you know. I got a call from somebody I hadn't talked to in years. And then now he needs me the day after the fact of when my lease is over.
Yeah, you're going straight into something.
Straight into. So I packed up the location, put it in the you know, as you know, I had a mobile barbershop. I packed it in that van and came straight down here. I still had the equipment in the back of the van, you know, and just went to work that Thursday, Friday. And so my family was still living in Fort Worth. So, you know, we had to have that discussion. Hey, I'm going to be traveling down there with the intent of moving there. So for 3 months, I was coming on Tuesday morning. I'd wake up at 3 in the morning, or a little bit sooner than that, be at the door by 4, be here by 7:30, and then get to work. I'd stay out here till Saturday and then drive back.
Wow.
Now we had a place up there that we weren't going to be getting out until June, right? So I'm like, oh, okay, 6 months, not too bad.
Yeah.
Well, come February of this year, right, in March, I'm like, I'm already getting tired of doing this. You know, I'm not seeing my kids for a week. I'm seeing them for Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and then I'm back on Tuesday. So it was really like 2.5 days I was seeing them per week for about 3 months. So our leasing people reached out to us and said, hey, or I don't remember if they reached out or however it worked, mid-March, they were like, well, we can actually get you out of this house by April. And this is mid-March.
Wow.
Now, you know, now that I'm talking about it, I see that it was all for a reason, because that weekend I was going to be going back to DFW. I didn't go back. As I was driving home to DFW, my wife called me. I was in Lampasas. She's like, hey, all the kids are sick right now. If you're probably going to get sick, go back. We may not even go back that next weekend. So we were like, well, we got to save money because we were about to have this move. So I'm like, I'm just going to stay here this weekend. So I stayed that weekend. I turned back around from Lampasas. I'm like, I can't risk getting sick right now. Again, you know, I'm thinking financially. I'm about to move. I got to move everything. And so being here, she called me that weekend, which I was here. And she's like, hey, they said that we can move out in April, and we have 2 weeks, right? And I'm like, wow, I got to find a place in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Now, we didn't have to say yes. We could have said no. We'll just
Right,
wait
right,
till
right.
June.
Because you had a contract.
But I was also saying, like, I'm tired of not being with
You
them.
were already thinking that.
Yeah. So that's kind of when I started getting more into my faith. I told
that's
more.
pretty intense.
Well, I didn't pray for it. I just told I didn't stress about it. I told my wife, if God opened this door for us and now we have 2 weeks, it's not for him to close it. So I didn't stress about it.
Yeah.
I'm like and
That's
most
pretty
people,
powerful.
I 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Less than 2 weeks. That means I got to find the place, sign everything, and then be out of that other house in 2 weeks. So we found a place. We just kind of jumped on it, and it worked out within 2 weeks. Again, I was like, I'm not going to stress until the week of that we have to move out. And then I'm like, all right. Well, I had a backup. I let my parents know. I said, hey, if we don't find something within 2 weeks, could they stay with you, for 2 weeks while I find a place, and they're fine with that. But I didn't want to do that.
Sure.
So God blessed us. Again, I didn't stress. We found the place. Most people were like, you're gonna have a hard time finding a place out here, and we found it. We signed on it, and by April 1st, we were out here with my family. So 2 weeks later, I was out here.
So this is interesting. Because you're still, we could say, chill on your faith on this stuff, because we were having a conversation about some stuff that you just done right now, business wise, and you're still the same way too. It's like, hey, God's put me in this place,
right?
So it all started with something that you rejected as advice, right? Like at first, it's like that's not what I needed to hear. I needed to hear the 3 steps of success and creating
how to be a billionaire, a millionaire, or whatnot, right?
Whatever the 3 a.m.
right,
switching the channels, right, and you catch it. And the one thing that the gentleman said that might have been, I needed something tangible, so
Right.
give me something, give me a contact. Is now, it seems like everything that you are living by now,
for sure.
because even it went even to finding a home, saying, man, if God's called us here, God's going to do it.
For sure.
And that's the way God works, right? And especially early on in your relationship with him, he wants first of all, for you to build a relationship with him, right? And I think that's what's critical in all this stuff right here is that you're experiencing God, but to fully experience him is that conversation now, personally, and letting him get to these places. I like to call them to places that sometimes we block off, the damaged areas. And I think that's where it starts getting exciting, because it's one thing doors opening up, and you can even have doubters say, well, that can happen to anybody. Julio, that happens all the time.
Right.
That's just phases of life. But when you start opening him up and saying, God, now I need you to get here. You did that a little bit with this addiction, because that's a God moment too. Saying, God, I need you to get there. Because my dad went cold turkey, and he was an alcoholic. Fit the whiskey every day. So he had those itches. He, even years later, 30 years later, he would walk by racks of alcohol, and his mouth would salivate. But then, what he said? He goes, I'd go get an iced tea, and it took care of the temptation. The temptation, right. Whatever it was. He always knew God always provided, right? And now you're in this moment. And we can see it, when your family, because you have a beautiful family, you can see this hope. And now it's like, hey, he's showing you that he wants to have this with you. There's something crazy about that. Because this stuff is like, it's funny. I saw this moment where you kind of looked up in the air. Now that I think about that, you were thinking about some stuff as you're processing it, right? You start to like, well, that's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Now that I see it. But he really wants to have this relationship with you. This doesn't happen all the time, but because he's seeing somebody that was like, man, lost, like we talked about, looking for something, and now is like, hey, I'm hopeless. I'm gonna trust God in this, and now these doors are just like slowly doing it. And I believe God has something, powerful for you, because not only because of your past or what you've done. I just believe he has something powerful for you because of a commitment. I see your kids, and, I always get excited when I see parents with kids because, man, their kids can't. It's not like your daughter comes up to you and says, "Dad, I want to talk to you about my future. It'd be really nice if you stop doing these things." And because I can see myself marrying somebody fantastic one day, and you just guys being blessed with and being, the next president, whatever it is, right? It's not like she sits down. They'll say little cute things as kids. But how crazy would it be if you hear the door knock and your daughter's 25 walking in the door right now?
Yeah.
And she's like, "Dad, the decision you made, the sacrifice you and Mom made has given me this." That's what I felt when I would stand up there and I'd say, "Dad, I know it wasn't easy, but you're my hero because I never saw the things you saw or experienced the things you experienced because of the decision you made."
For sure.
And I think that that's critical.
Yeah, and it's what you're saying is 100%. That's how I feel. Is I can go back to my parents and say they tried the best they can, and because of them, because of the struggles they went through with, they did for a time, they did come in legally. Now, they're citizens now, but they crossing the river and going through that. Well, them going through that, I didn't have to.
Right.
I'm a citizen here, and a lot of things that drive me too was that I don't want to make their efforts go in vain with me not doing anything here.
Yeah.
They wanted to build a life here, and now my next job, if you will, is to make sure that my kids are even better.
Yeah.
That they don't have to experience things like I did. You
Right.
know, maybe they will. We try our best, but at least we're trying.
But Jesus, the best advice anybody could ever give you, and Jesus being at the center of your family. Understand this. Jesus being at the center of your family it means that you're right. They're going to go through storms. I went through storms, even though my dad made that decision. But Jesus being at the center, being that lighthouse, I always knew where to get back. Some of us don't have that. Some of us that will just go lost through life. But I knew where I would find Jesus at. And you guys are establishing that. That's a lot of things that sometimes happen, unfortunately, as they say with kids. They haven't had the experience in seeing God. So that's why we're starting to see a godless generation. Yep. That's why we're starting to see a lot of stuff that you're privy to. You're seeing it in schools. You're seeing in public because, you can instill your kids with certain things, but you have to instill Jesus because how beautiful is this? We don't know what our kids go through sometimes, but to know that your kid's in bed and they're having a conversation with God. Say, "God, help my dad. I see my dad's, needs it." Those are moments that are powerful that only God can do in people that are wanting to change their life.
And I'm glad you say that because, we're already seeing a change in them. My wife and I, we didn't grow up praying during our meals.
Yeah.
Or we're instilling something like that where our kids will call us out. We didn't pray. I'm like, oh snap, that's because it's not something that I'm used to doing. I'm still learning. Versus for them now, it's become more of a habit.
Sure.
Where they'll do it.
That's awesome.
And like they're the ones that are schooling me on that. Like they'll remind me. Yeah. So it's like again, you just said that,
kids
and
awesome,
you're already seeing that.
Kids are awesome. And
so it's a good thing. We're definitely all growing together. Where if we do have to miss on a day, right?
Yeah.
My kids will get on to us like, why? Like they're the parents. Why aren't we going today?
Yeah.
I'm like, well, today I have to go do this. Something came up for whatever reason, right? Which is not an excuse. We can go, somebody can make an effort. But, there've been days that we're not here or we're driving back to Dallas and we're like, hey, we're not going to be going to church this weekend. Why? We're going to Dallas that weekend. Remember,
God knows what He's doing.
Right.
God knows what He's doing, Julio. And I tell you one thing: as parents, we experience that stuff, and you're right. You're accountable. I want to because we had a short time today, but we're gonna make it. We're gonna have a couple more of these with Julio because there's a lot more, and also with your wife too. I think your wife would be great because I know she's
definitely we'd be able to bounce things off.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. So we had some messages come in. We had a Pasta Cristo from Norma. We had a good morning and God bless you all from Nina. Thank you, Lord, for your mercy from Mama. Sister Fanny, Brother Richard with the Praise the Lord, Brother Lorenzo, God bless everyone enjoying the conversation, looking forward to see what the Lord has in store for Julio and his family. Sister Velma, God bless you all this day. God bless the family and the desire to have to seek the Lord. Keep going. The Lord will bless you and your children. Brother Kevin, wow, this is powerful. God bless you all. And then we also, I don't know if I saw some, Brother Anthony with good morning, Mercy, praise the Lord. Good to hear Julio on the radio and seeing him bring his family to church. Getting closer to God, it's a good thing. Psalm 73:28. But it is good for me to draw near to God. I have put my trust in the Lord, God, that I may declare all thy works. Psalm 73:28. Amen. God bless Anthony. And then Nina with thank you, Nina, for dropping off these nice little gifts that we're about to leave off with. Nina says, God bless you and your family. They are a blessing to our church. You and your wife will reap the benefits of raising your kids in the ways of the Lord. It's not easy, but you will see blessings with the sacrifices. Prayers for you and your family always. Amen. Praise the Lord.
Amen.
Well, Julio, again, I appreciate, we talked about doing this. We're going to do it again.
For sure.
And we'll plan out more time. That way you have, time to really talk about things. But I appreciate it. I know it was funny. You see, it's unorthodox, isn't it?
Oh, could have been all over the place.
But
there's still more to be said.
I know,
sure.
but it's crazy though, because like I told you, if it would have been like we could script it, but it feels Hollywood. We could say, well, let's just go into this, and then at the ending hour, let's end it with this. No, you know what? We're gonna let God, and I feel like God really used you, and I hope you feel good. I hope you feel like hey, I was able to release some stuff, because sometimes we feel like, hey, how is this going to be taken, interpreted? Man, just understand one thing: God starts with all of us in a way, but have that desire to keep on digging. You can keep on digging. You're going to see that God's going to bless you tremendously. And it looks like Tristan brought you your gift here.
Brought the cup.
We got the cup.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, campfire
Nice.
cup right
Thank
there.
you. Oh yeah.
Yeah. So
I enjoy doing that. So
yeah.
I
So
appreciate it.
yeah, praise the Lord. God bless you, Julio. Is there anything you want to say to anybody or sign off with?
Well, I just appreciate that that I was invited here. I'm very new at this, and I made it known to you. I'm not scripture literate, so to have a rookie, if you will, in this journey is something that I'm grateful for, because I could be open about it. I'm not gonna be. I've been open with the things that I've done, and I felt that I needed to do that because some of us sometimes have to wear a mask when you come to church, and let it be known that we're all human and we're all facing our own struggles.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Powerful.
we're not too different from each other.
We all started this journey that way, and I'll tell you one thing: I appreciate you opening up and always the honesty from you. I love that. I think you can never go wrong if you're honest with stuff and just needing it. But I want you to feel like and I know you've mentioned this a couple of times that I've, you've cut my hair and stuff like this, but you guys feel like you found a home. Well, we feel like we have family here. We feel like that with you. So
yes.
I've told you that. I know it's hard sometimes because you're not used to that. It's like, what's the catch? But what I mean by that in life, but we're here for you, in your family, and you don't have a lot of stuff that's around here. So reach out if you need something. Just reach out. I know, because it's hard. I know it's hard because you're not used to that, growing up that way or being like that. Because it's not like you're calling me all the time doing stuff. So when you call me, we want to show up and help y'all, and be a blessing to y'all, because we're seeing something pretty powerful with your family, and we believe in that. So, but God bless you, and I appreciate the time that you spared this morning. I know you've got some busy appointments coming up, so God bless you. We'll be praying for your business and your family and this move and all this stuff that's going on. But we'll plan another one here pretty quickly. That way we can go on to some of these other in-depth things that I know God's working in your life with.
Definitely.
All right, God bless you.
God bless.
God bless everyone. Adelante con la cruz, hermanos. Dios te bendiga a todos. Gracias por estar con nosotros. And praise the Lord. God bless y'all.
Tocamos música norteña. Que Dios les bendiga.